Why do we have Curtis on again? Well, we got the whiners about trade. They're all over the place. We got Congress trying to stop the president, doesn't want tariffs. We've got that movement going on. We've got Pierre Trudeau Jr. or the third or whatever his name is. He's saying to the president, look, I've been allowed to screw you guys for 40 years. How come I can't screw you anymore? I want to keep screwing you. What's going on here? We've got the European Union on trade basically saying, hey, you know, this trade deal we got with you for the last 5 decades, this is really part of the Marshall Plan. That's right, the Marshall Plan. Like, you give us money forever in perpetuity. That's what Marshall did after World War II. Doesn't stop just because President Trump comes in. And then you got Larry Kudlow, TV Larry, running around saying that, well, it's just a negotiating tool. He's not going to really do the tariffs because, you know, we're all free traders here. We're all free traders. Not going to be no tariffs. It's just bluster and negotiating. At the end of the day, it's all going to be fine. And then we've got the double standard. And the double standard is, you ask the free trading economists, well, what about the $500 billion annual trade deficit with China? And they say, well, it doesn't matter. Trade deficits don't matter. It's good for the consumer. Oh, really? Then you ask the same question. You say, well, what about China? The fact that they have a $500 billion annual trade surplus with the U.S. Is that good for them? Oh, yes, that's great for them. Let me get this straight. It's great for the countries that have a trade surplus, but it doesn't matter for the countries like us that have a trade deficit. Now, I don't know where these people did math, but it certainly is not in your basic middle school, because 2 + 2 = 4, not -7. Unbelievable. Curtis Ellis is going to come up in a few moments. He's going to straighten all this out for us, and we're looking forward to that here on the John Fredericks Radio Network. But first, this segment here live in Washington, D.C., on your favorite show of all time. By the way, did I tell you that I was the Godzilla of the truth in America? You probably didn't know that, so just FYI. But this segment brought to you by America First Policies. That's right, you know, the Korean War, it's never officially ended. The Korean War is still going on. They have a ceasefire, but no armistice, no truce. So the Korean War never officially ended. North Korea has remained a menace since. Despite promises to previous administrations, it continued to develop weapons of mass destruction, nuclear bombs, long-range missiles. And it sold its deadly technology to rogue regimes across the world. It bypassed international sanctions and sold its own people into slavery to finance its deadly agenda. Now, after tough talk and action from Washington, North Korea is finally ready to come to the negotiating table. Leaders from North Korea say the U.S. and the U.S. plan to meet for the first time ever in Singapore. Now, is the head of this murderous regime ready to negotiate in good faith, put an end to his nuclear program, and finally allow the Korean people to live in peace? Call Congress today and tell them politics ends at the water's edge. 202-224-3121. Americans must stand united as we approach this historic summit. For more information, go to americafirstpolicies.org. That's americafirstpolicies.org. This message is paid for and authorized by America First Policies Incorporated. Joining us now, he's a senior advisor with America First Policies. Timing is everything, as the Fräulein says. It's all about the timing. Joining us now live from Washington, D.C., just like me, Curtis Ellis. He's been with the administration. He's been in the Department of Labor. He's been with the transition team. He's been in the Trump campaign. He's done it all, and he's with us now once again. Hey, Curtis, good to have you, man.
Hey, it's great to be here, John.
I was really fired up to have you on today. So the whiners are at it again, and I guess the European Union thinks that the Marshall Plan is still in play here, basically saying, well, we want to sell our goods into the U.S. and our cars and everything else because it is the #1 market in the world, and we want to do that tariff-free. But if you try to sell anything into the European Union, well, you got to pay value-added tax, import tax, this tax, that tax. It all adds up to about 30%. So there's another massive trade deficit with the European Union as a whole and Germany and the big countries. That's money going out from us to them. But now they're whining because the president says that's not fair. What do you make of this whole thing?
Well, let me give you a little fact here. I know facts get in the way, and they're not as much fun. The European Union puts a 7.5% tariff tax on aluminum coming into the EU. We put 0%. So they've been getting a free ride for a real long time here, folks. So they got a lot on their complaining. As he said, we have been using access to the American market, letting all these countries sell their stuff in America as the Marshall Plan, as a way for these countries to build up their economy, build up their middle class. We provide defense to the entire European continent so these people don't have to spend a nickel on their own defense. And they've got their Airbus industry, right? They make their airplanes, the Airbus airplanes, totally government subsidized, totally crony capitalist regime, and they compete with Boeing. They sell around the world in direct competition with American companies. So, I really don't have a whole lot of. I'm not really crying for them. I'm not really feeling bad for the European Union right now. What's amazing to me is and it's really not that amazing, I guess, because we know these people are a bunch of creeps, is the major media coverage of all this. The CNN now had up talking about how President Trump has turned our foreign policy on its head. He's punishing our allies, and he is rewarding the most dictatorial regimes in the world. I mean, this is just pure baloney. And he's, other more internationalist presidents would be more deferential to our allies. I mean, what good is an ally if they're eating your lunch? Look, we can be, and why do you assume that these people aren't going to speak up for what's good for them? Of course the allies are going to complain that they're not going to get the same great deal that we've been giving them for the last 70 years. Since World War II ended, that was 70 years ago, folks. We've been giving them a great deal. And now it's time to say, well, we're going to change the terms of the deal a little bit because we've got all kinds of people in Mississippi and Alabama and Illinois and Pennsylvania and Michigan that are hurting real bad because you've taken our industries away. We've given them away. And so, it's ridiculous. There's another great story out there. So now Mexico, they're going to hit us with tariffs. They're going to put tariffs on bourbon, right? Well, look, the Mexicans shouldn't be drinking bourbon anyway. They got plenty of tequila down there. They can drink the tequila, right?
What about the pork?
You know what I say? If the Mexicans don't buy our bourbon, that's more for me. Okay, great. This is a good thing.
Now, what about? They also said they're going to put a 20% tariff on pork. Right. And so immediately the Chamber of Commerce and others, Americans for Prosperity, is saying, look, this is really going to hurt pork farmers, pig farmers in the U.S. that depend on these exports to Mexico. And now with a 20% tariff, their meat, it's not economically viable for the Mexicans to buy that. They're going to find pork cheaper somewhere else. So they're saying that's really going to hurt the U.S. farmer and the pig farmer. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, right. The head of the Pork Council, right? And, by the way, pork is probably, if you dig deep enough, and you probably don't have to dig too deep in the pig pen, to find that pork is subsidized by the U.S. government in one way or another, right? Either what they feed the pork or how they export the pork or the fact that the pork is slaughtered at USDA developed slaughterhouses. So, the pork, there's a lot of pork in pork, right? But that's beside the point. The head of the Pork Council says there's 110,000 U.S. jobs directly related to Mexican pork purchases from the U.S. How did they come up with that number? So 100,000 U.S. jobs and 110,000. And we're supposed to believe that all 110,000 people are now immediately going to be destitute, homeless, barefoot, and in rags because the Mexicans are talking about putting a 20% or a 10% tariff on pork. Well, look, let me tell you something. Something about farmers. They ought to be able to diversify. If they can't sell pork, well, maybe they should raise chickens. or if they can't sell their corn, they can grow wheat. They could put something different in the ground. Oh, but what we're talking about here are these giant factory farms that are like stretched from here to the horizon. And
right.
They got 10 million animals in there who are being fed by illegal Mexican immigrants, right? That's what we're talking. We're not talking about old McDonald had a farm. We're talking about Cargill had, and it's actually probably Smithfield, which is owned by the Chinese, has a factory farm.
Right.
And they're dumping 10 million gallons of pig feces in the backyard, right? So I don't have a lot of sympathy for these people, to be quite honest. You know, it's like, let's get back to some basics here, folks. America needs industry. We're not going to all be farmers, and we're not going to all be factory pig farmers either.
Right.
We need farms. We need industry. We need
right.
a country that has a diversified economy. So let's quit with the whining from Justin Trudeau and from the Pork Council. It's like, let's pull together. We're under direct economic aggression from China and other countries, and we've got to pull together as a nation and do what's good for all Americans, not just my own little pig factory farm that's making life miserable for my neighbors because they got to smell the pig feces downwind.
You know, Curtis, when World War II started, the Ford Motor Company was selling an enormous amount of new cars into Europe, and specifically to the Germans. And when World War II started, the U.S. basically said you can't send any more vehicles to Germany. Right. I mean, I don't remember Mr. Ford at the time or other Congress people screaming that, well, this is going to cause a problem because we can't sell cars and it means that, prices are going to go higher for $5 somewhere. They simply said, well, okay, it's in our best interest. And that was the end of it. I mean, they didn't hear a peep out of anybody. They understood it. Now we get this constant nonsense. Here's Senator Bob Corker from Tennessee retiring. He says, while we all agree on the need to ensure international trade system is fair for American workers, companies, and consumers, unfortunately, the administration is abusing the Section 232 authority delegated to the president by Congress. This statement by Senator Corker yesterday, he says, making claims regarding national security to justify what is inherently an economic question not only harms the very people we want to help, but it impairs relations with our allies. He also goes on to say if the president truly believes invoking Section 232 is necessary to protect the U.S. from a threat, he should make the case to Congress and to the American people and do the hard work necessary to secure congressional approval. So he's got a bill requiring the president to submit to Congress any proposal to adjust imports or tariffs. And both Virginia Senators Kaine and Warner came out in favor of it and saying that they were opposed to this so-called trade war and the president shouldn't have the authority to do this. Curtis, same old story, different day, right? They can't stop the president. They can't stop the economy. So now they're going to put in some kind of a bill basically that says, no, we have the authority to do tariffs. What say you?
These are the same people that voted to give Obama extra constitutional authority to negotiate trade deals. And now they want to take away President Trump's power to have a sane America First trade policy. These people's hypocrisy and cluelessness is just astounding. But even more astounding is their hubris, their arrogance. They think that they bent over. They think we forget. They bent over backwards to give Obama all of the constitutional power that is reserved for Congress. They fell all over themselves to try to pass the Trans-Pacific Partnership that gave away American sovereignty because their internationalist, globalist president, Barack Obama, wanted to lead from behind or lead with his behind or something and let America be last in the world because Justin Trudeau and his dress-up gang wanted to do something different, so we're going to do whatever is best and whatever they want us to do. America is just this evil, racist country or something. I don't know what they were thinking, but Obama had this globalist plan that we're going to dissolve American sovereignty, surrender and do what's good for the global economy, and raise millions of people out of poverty in Malaysia and China and everywhere else but America. And these so-called Republican senators like Bob Corker were right on point with the program, with the Obama program. Now that we have a president that's standing up for Americans, American workers, American businesses, what's good for America, he can't run away fast enough. Little Bob Corker has a lot of nerve talking about what's good for America. He's the guy that approved the Iran deal. He's the guy that brought forth a bill that eviscerated the Senate's ability to approve treaties by a two-third majority. The Iran deal, he said, somebody said, and Corker said, he's amazing. This guy is amazing. He said, well, no, we're not taking away the president's power. It's as if he negotiates a deal with North Korea. Of course, he has to submit that to Congress for approval. Well, excuse me, when Barack Obama negotiated the Iran deal, Bob Corker, you did not require President Trump to submit that to Senate for two-thirds approval. No. In fact, what you did is you wrote a bill and had the Senate pass it that if Congress wanted to reject the Iran deal, they needed a two-thirds majority. So you've got a lot of nerve there. He's lining himself up for a job with like the Business Roundtable or the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, some fat lobbying job on K Street where he'll get paid $5 million a year to sell out American sovereignty to the globalists. That's what Bob Corker is doing. And everybody knows it. When he appeared with President Trump at a rally in Nashville, the people booed him. They know the kind of joker he is.
Well, he's at it again. And it's, Curtis, it's just the same old story day after day. These people never stop because they don't really believe in anything the president is doing. And look, when you get the Canadian Prime Minister whining to the president about steel and aluminum tariffs when they have for years subsidized timber and their dairy production, just to name two things. I could name probably 10. Just those two because they're so blatant. They've subsidized the timber industry, subsidized dairy, putting Canadian tax dollars into dairy production and wood production in order to drive our dairy and timber companies out of business so they could glut the U.S. market. I mean, and then he's complaining to the president about what authority he's got to put steel and aluminum tariffs on the shipping into the United States from Canada, and they've been subsidizing it forever. I mean, it is just ridiculous. I don't even know how the president keeps a straight face.
And doing the same thing with steel. The Italian government, 700 million euros they give to the steel industry in subsidies. The British, 150 million pounds, that's like about more than $300 million they subsidize their steel industry. Germany, 9 billion with a B euros, and a euro is worth more than $1, so that's probably $12 billion. So these people have been subsidizing their steel industry. Guess where that steel ends up? Being sold to the U.S. So they got a lot of nerve, and the U.S. senators, it's even more outrageous that they're more concerned with the German steel industry, the Italian steel industry, the Belgian steel industry than the American steel industry. So they should just STFU.
Unbelievable. Curtis Ellis, thanks for being with us. Always a pleasure to have you on. We'll see you next week. This is John Fredericks Radio Network.